Everything you do here, all of ours, everything was fantasy to begin with. And the fantasy has a proper reality. That is not to be forgotten. Fantasy is not nothing. It is, of course, not a tangible object, but it is a fact nevertheless. It is, a form of energy.
Yes.
Despite the fact we can't measure it.
Yes.
It is a manifestation of something.
Yes.
And that is a reality. That is just a reality as, for instance, the peace treaty of Versailles or something like that.
Yes.
It is no more. You can't show it.
Yes.
But it has been a fact.
Yes. Yes.
And so the psychical events are facts, are realities. And when you observe the stream of images within, you observe an aspect of the world.
Yes.
Of the world within. Because the psyche, you know, if you understand it as a phenomenon that takes place in so-called living bodies, then it is a quality of matter. As our body consists of matter, we discovered that this matter has another aspect, namely a psychical aspect.
Yes. Yes.
And so it is simply the world from within, seen from within.
Yes.
It is just as if we were seeing into another aspect of matter. And so, you see, the man who is going by the external world, by the influences of the external world, say society or perceptions, sense perceptions, thinks that he is more valid, you know, because this is valid, this is real. And the man who goes by the subjective factor is not valid because subjective factor is nothing. Yeah. No, that man is just as well based because he is bases himself upon the world from within.
Yeah.
A quote from Carl Jung: "I'm not denying that great gains have resulted from the evolution of civilized society, but these gains have been made at the price of enormous losses, whose extent we have scarcely begun to estimate. Part of the purpose of my comparisons between the primitive and civilized states of man has been to show the balance of these losses and gains. Primitive man was much more governed by his instincts than his rational modern descendants, but have learned to control themselves. In this civilizing process, we have increasingly divided our consciousness from the deeper instinctive strata of the human psyche, and even ultimately from the somatic basis of the psychic phenomenon. Fortunately, we have not lost these basic instinctive strata. They remain part of the unconscious, even though they may express themselves only in the form of dream images. These instinctive phenomena, one may not, incidentally, always recognize them for what they are, for their character is symbolic and play a vital part in what I have called the compensating function of dreams. For the sake of mental stability and even psychological health, the unconscious and the conscious must be integrated, connected, and thus move on parallel lines. If they are split apart or dissociated, psychological disturbance follows. In this respect, dream symbols are the essential message carriers from the instinctive to the rational parts of the human mind, and their interpretation enriches the poverty of consciousness so that it learns to understand again the forgotten language of the instincts. Of course, people are bound to query this function, since its symbols so often pass unnoticed or uncomprehended. In normal life, the understanding of dreams is often considered superfluous." End quote. We must become conscious of the contradiction between the external world and our inner world. As we continue to fixate our attention on business, on society, and on our external lives, we are led further away from cultivating the depths of our individual personality. Even our private lives are externally focused, as for example, we can often focus on marriage and our relationships as just external roles, and we focus on our work as just external tasks. There is not much room in our current lives for the cultivation of deep harmonious relationships and inner work. there is little room for focusing on the inner world. And because of this, we have been deeply weakened. We have weakened the creative inner numinous energy that comes with the cultivation of the inner man, of the world within. And we have treated it and mistreated it as something that is unnecessary to living our lives. We only see those things that are external as things that are necessary. We only see the external world as our salvation. And because of that, we have lost our zest for life. And when you lose your zest for life, you lose your meaning. You lose the creative life force that compels you forward, and you are trapped in a dark place where you are limited to a preordained system. And that is what society is. We are living only on the rationalizations of the past. We are not injecting anything new into our lives, as there is no room for the new creations from the unconscious to come forth, and there is no room for the numinous energy to be injected into our lives. So that means we do not have the ability to see things in a fresh way, the ability to create new meaning. Because of this, we stultify our existence. And as people go to work every day, they seem to be getting more depressed and frustrated and wondering why. Why is my life not working out? Why are my relationships not working out? Why am I experiencing so much angst, anger, and frustration in my life? Might it be because we have neglected the main thing in life? The main thing being the world from within, the inner man, the inner parts of who we are. We have rejected our true selves, and that means we have rejected a large part of our individual nature in favor of a societal role. Jung said, and I quote, "I've spent more than half a century in investigating natural symbols, and I have come to the conclusion that dreams and their symbols are not stupid and meaningless. On the contrary, dreams provide the most interesting information for those who take the trouble to understand their symbols. The results, it is true, have little to do with such worldly concerns as buying and selling. But the meaning of life is not exhaustively explained by one's business life, nor is the deep desire of the human heart answered by a bank account." End quote. Our society is structured in such a way that it seems we have no place for the human heart. For example, at work, we can't even be ourselves. We have to act as if we are in servitude to someone else's external idea, like we are cogs in a machine or just a part of an algorithm, and all we have to do is live out a particular function. And in doing so, we suppress the rest of ourselves. That is interesting, that we suppress what we see to be ourselves, to be someone else, to play a role in society, and maybe part of that is necessary, but it seems to be increasingly overtaking our lives, that we are just living within our persona, and we live such a persona and ego-driven life that we can't even connect with our family anymore. When we get home from work, we turn on the television or social media, and we continue to live in the external world, watching stupid news programs that aren't ever going to help us, that have agendas to further the political divide, and we are attaching our identity to this external world more and more, and it is hard to see ourselves as anything other than just external actors. There is a quote by Jesus in the Bible that says, "Do not worry," saying, "What shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? For the pagans run after these things, and your heavenly Father knows you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Close quote. What Jesus is talking about with this verse is the same thing Jung was talking about when he said that the introvert is just as well based as he bases himself on the world from within. We have to learn to trust that when we base ourselves on our internal world, that there will be a corresponding provision that takes care of our external world. Instead of trusting in the unconscious process, we've outsourced our psychology to external entities and look to their external activity to provide our salvation. Think for a moment what it means that a corporation can be called an entity. We call them legal entities as if they are a person themselves, and this is why there has been much debate over the years surrounding ethical responsibility of these entities, because their actions bear consequences on our individual lives. So think about these entities from a psychological perspective. They are like externalized psychological complexes, which exhibit personalities and corresponding behaviors of their own, except they are not made up of feeling tones as the complexes of our unconscious are. Instead, they are made up of rationalizations whose rationality is bound within our society. They are ultimately self-serving and only serve others if they can capitalize from the transaction. They are not our salvation, they are our enslavement, as they have captivated our attention on the external world alone. As we operate under the psychological matrix of these societal entities, much of our lives are externalized. They tell us what to do, what to think about, and what to value, and much of our lives are governed by our job descriptions and roles. And this slowly but surely shapes our mind, shapes the way we think, so the creative capacities and the abilities we have are snuffed out. They are excluded from the society that we are building, and they are only included if such a creative thought has what is called market value. In other words, your creativity is only valuable to the system if it can capitalize off it, and if it can use it to its advantage, and if it can strip it of its underlying creative forces and use the general pattern of a thing and duplicate it as a product or service for worldly success. But we know that not all things that are valuable have market value. For example, the fact you love your child is not something that you can go to sell to someone else. It is priceless and can only help your child. Or the fact you could draw and have a therapeutic experience is a priceless experience of creativity or self-expression. But in the marketplace, no one cares about your creativity or that you love your children. We've got divorce lawyers. We have all sorts of things in place in the world to capitalize off your misery. They do not care about you as a creative spiritual individual or as a psychological individual, including your mental health. And they only care about your economic value and your external utility. And sometimes these things line up, but oftentimes they don't. And the fact that not everything that is truly valuable to the human being has a corresponding market value means that there is a split between what we are creating externally and what we know that we have to cultivate internally. And this is a big problem. And I'm not saying that I have all the answers, but I am saying that we need a refocusing of how we view the world. And we need to remind ourselves that there are important aspects of the human being, of life, of existence, that we have marginalized and rejected from our external pursuits and our societal focus. And we need to revalue our deep psychological being. And only as we do this are we going to be able to come back to a sense of wholeness and have that meaning again in life. Now, I'm not saying that anyone who is successful in a worldly sense is evil or bad, but I am saying that it seems to be more often than not that our society doesn't see how the inner life is the foundation of the external world. After all, the conscious, which is primarily governed by our ego, and that which society is built upon, derives its origins from the unconscious and the psychic energy of the unconscious complexes. If we live purely by rational means, we reject the underpinnings that gave rise to our society. We continue to justify our society in and of itself. We further the split between the two poles of our personality, and we reject wholeness. It is very important that we integrate both aspects of our life, and it's very hard to do because it seems that the number one personality that is externally achieving worldly success is antithetical to the number two personality that is seeking wholeness and satisfaction in the inner world. But the interesting thing is that the cultivation of the number two personality and its creativity and its numinous energy and all the surrounding life-giving emotion that comes with it is the very basis and the very roots of where all the external value comes from. So we must not turn back on ourselves and turn against the origins of society itself, because our society originated in our imagination, and so we cannot treat our imagination as if it is nothing, for it is the roots of our society and of our lives. So each individual has to be aware of this, and as we become more aware, the wholeness of the self will begin to manifest, and as we integrate the internal and external world, we bring heaven to earth.